They say time tells all truths, but what if one man could make time tell exactly what it saw? The shop smelled of oil and jasmine tea. Small gears lived in glass jars like insects, and the workbench was a battlefield of tiny victories. A stripped screw here, a polished escape wheel there. Jonah Kinte moved with the patience of someone who had learned to listen to metal the same way elders listen to scripture. He was the last of a line of clockmakers, a black man in a neighborhood where the new money preferred brushed steel and silent elevators. Jonah built things people called quaint. He built things people laughed at. But he also built things because he believed machines could remember what humans forgot. He'd been working on the hour record, a watch the size of a pocket timepiece that did one unusual thing. For 1 hour it captured, not sound, not video, not a data log, but the texture of lived perception as its wearer experienced it. It translated sights, smells, and the cadence of moments into a lattice of engraved teeth and micro-etched plates. When wound and set to playback, the gears turned and the watch released a tiny, precise memory you could read like a sentence. Jonah didn't patent it. Patents require lawyers and money, and Jonah had neither. He kept blueprints in a cedar chest and a prototype under a green cloth on his workbench. They called him eccentric at the community cafe, and they called him obsolete in the glass towers. One afternoon, a group of white investors from a boutique tech fund wandered into his shop asking for local color for a spot piece. They stood on Jonah's threshold and pointed at the watch like it was a museum relic. "What's the market?" one asked, smiling in that way people smile when they already own the world. Another cracked a joke about nostalgia and said, "We don't buy time, we buy scale." Jonah answered politely, wound the watch, and offered to show them. The prototype hummed like a throat clearing. He pressed the playback pin into his palm and let them see something small and honest. His father's hands wearing the watch as he taught Jonah to file brass. The investors laughed, soft and tidy. Then they left, rolling their eyes at what they called romantic tinkering. Months later, the city's historic clock tower, the mechanical heart of the borough, began to stall. Signals that synchronized trams and hospital elevators hiccuped. A maintenance crew was dispatched, and the head technician, a man whose pride eclipsed his caution, climbed into the clock chest to tinker while the tower hummed out of rhythm. The next day, a misaligned escapement sent a spike through the network. A hospital elevator stopped between floors with patients inside. A tram derailed slightly. Alarms that should have warned people failed to coordinate evacuations. Panic collected like static. When the city asked for answers, headlines wanted a villain. The maintenance firm hired consultants, and the mayor demanded immediate fixes. The boardrooms held their breath. The insurance adjusters sharpened their pens. Jonah watched from his shop window as men in suits streamed past his door and into the clock tower offices, barking timelines into phones. Then a knock came on his door. The technician who'd been in the chest, a young man with grease under his nails, holding a broken pocket watch he'd carried since childhood. "I don't remember the hour," he stammered. "Something went wrong in there." "I can't," he showed Jonah the watch. It was a simple thing, but the wound of memory was there. The technician had fainted and returned with partial recollection. The city wanted a recorder. Jonah had one in the cedar chest. Jonah wound his prototype and listened. The gears clicked like a throat clearing, and the playback unspooled an hour of the technician's perception. The cold of the iron ladder, the sharp smell of solvent, the shadow that moved with precision and placed a small, innocuous shim where none should be. The memory recorded, with heartbreaking clarity, a third pair of hands. Not the clumsy hands of an apprentice or the tired hands of crewmen, but steady, deliberate fingers that set a tooth one notch out of place before closing the hatch. The playback showed the face, not the faceless circumstance the city wanted to blame. The watch told a story that charts and audits could not. Sabotage, not accident. Jonah took the playback to the investigators. Some scoffed, a handmade watch? But the forensic team had nothing better. They compared the micro-etching of the hour records plates with the technician's witness statements and found a match. The shim had been placed, and placed on purpose. Cameras for the clock house had been disabled in a neat window of 20 minutes. The face Jonah's watch replayed was traced back to a contractor whose firm stood to gain from the tower shutdown. People who had laughed at Jonah's little machine were suddenly looking at a manual memory like it was evidence in a court of law. When the contractor was confronted, the room smelled of expensive cologne and thinner excuses. He stammered through PR-friendly disclaimers until the playback, cold, mechanical, undeniable, was wound and set on the table. The gears made their soft, awful language. The room went quiet in a way nobody learns in business school. The men who once said Jonah's watch had no market found themselves needing an explanation that couldn't be phrased as profit margin. Jonah didn't grandstand. He didn't let himself be carried into the lights. He packed the prototype back in a cedar and went home with his tea. But the impact rippled. The contractor faced charges, the city rewired its safety protocols, and the maintenance crew received the training it had been denied. Jonah's shop began to fill with requests, from historians, from safety boards, from grieving families who wanted one small, factual hour of a loved one saved. Jonah trained apprentices not to monetize memory, but to preserve it with ethics and care. He insisted on community stewardship over corporate control. The moral sits like a simple gear in an otherwise complex machine. Memory, like value, is not always measured by market forecasts. Dismissing what you don't immediately monetize is a strategic blind spot. Mocking craft because it lacks a scalable pitch can cost lives. Respect for quiet expertise compounds better than arrogance. Jonah's watch taught the city something the investors never could. Sometimes the most useful tool is not the loudest one in the room, and time itself will always remember who is right.